5 years ago, standing at the port of Ningbo felt like a physical assault on the senses. The deafening roar of cranes, the heavy smell of diesel, and a horizon completely blocked by a wall of container ships created an overwhelming testament to industrial volume. Recently, however, meeting a logistics worker named Li Wei there revealed an atmosphere that was unsettlingly different. Over a hurried lunch, Li Wei did not boast about record volumes as she might have in the past. Instead, she described the new, quiet days with a practiced, almost brittle calm, masking the nervous chatter on the docks about which factories were cutting hours. At first glance, this scene appears to be a simple story of decline, the end of the cheap manufacturing era. Yet, looking just a few lots over reveals a stark contradiction. Rows upon rows of sleek, high-tech electric vehicles, the crown jewels of modern engineering, waiting to be shipped. This juxtaposition looks like a massive triumph, a perfect pivot from plastic toys to the future of transportation. But the reality shifts upon closer inspection. History suggests that these shiny cars are not necessarily a savior. They could be a trap. The scene recalls the solar panel industry of a decade ago, where China captured 80% of the market and achieved total dominance, only to be rewarded with market crashes, brutal trade wars, and a victory that resembled a bloodbath. Seeing those EVs sitting on the quiet docks creates a sinking feeling, forcing the realization that the strategy of simply making things better and cheaper is broken. If winning the manufacturing game merely triggers 100% tariffs and international hostility, then the old rules are dead. This leaves a critical, existential question. If being the world's factory, even a high-tech one, is a dead end, how does an economy of this magnitude break that ceiling? The nervous quiet next to the high-tech triumph represents a dilemma where the fundamental laws of economics seem to be working against the old model. Economic analysis from the IMF and other bodies indicates that an economy too large to grow solely from increasing physical export volumes risks perpetually fueling global trade tensions. Even if the goods are advanced, like EVs or batteries, the strategy of overwhelming the world with physical products has a political ceiling. That friction translates directly into tariffs and targeted trade disputes. The old playbook, based on volume, scale, and price advantage, has hit both a political and economic wall. The new, higher-level strategy requires a deep structural pivot, not finding a better product to ship, but fundamentally changing what is being exported. The strategic direction is a definitive shift away from selling tangible physical goods found on assembly lines and towards selling intangible knowledge, standards, services, and patents. This is the invisible export, far less susceptible to traditional trade barriers. Unpacking this pivot requires understanding the philosophy behind it, which is not merely moving up the value chain in a straight line, but establishing a hierarchy of competitiveness. A defining maxim of this strategy asserts that third-tier companies make products, second-tier companies make technology, and first-tier companies make standards. This hierarchy reframes the entire mission. Products are easy to count, tax, and replace. Technology can be licensed or reverse engineered. Standards, however, the fundamental rules for how things work and communicate, create economic gravity. The pursuit of becoming a first-tier economy driven by setting standards opens the path to this invisible export. It is a business model designed to generate high value with almost no physical shipping costs, circumventing tariff barriers entirely. When licensing a software platform or a core patent, one exports lines of code or documentation rather than tons of steel. Concrete, measurable evidence of this pivot exists in intellectual property data. The sheer volume suggests an aggressive transition from being the world's factory floor to becoming the world's laboratory and architect. For the fifth consecutive year, China has led the world in patent applications, filing a staggering 1.8 million applications in a recent year. This number represents nearly half of the entire world's total patent filings, a centralized concentration of intellectual effort. These patents are not for trivial improvements. The strategic focus is entirely on critical future technologies. The World Intellectual Property Organization notes that the overwhelming majority of these filings are in domains like artificial intelligence and next-generation telecom infrastructure. This intellectual capital is being actively deployed as an export product, with exports in knowledge-intensive services, especially IP royalties, expanding at over 20% annually. This growth has propelled China to the number 2 spot globally in this specific export category, indicating that the pivot is working by decoupling growth from the political limits of physical manufacturing. This transition transcends abstract economics. It has profound human and social implications, creating a generational liberation from the old model. Consider the story of Mr. Chen and his daughter in Shenzhen. For 30 years, Mr. Chen's life was defined by the physical limits of the assembly line, speed, exhaustion, and the repetition of assembling countless components. He carried a silent pride in his endurance, yet he knew his value was tethered to being the cheapest, most efficient source of labor in an era of quantity over quality. In vivid contrast, his daughter inhabits a completely different world. Working in a modern high-rise office park, she has shifted from exporting physical sweat to exporting her mind. Her business licenses sophisticated AI-driven energy management systems to utility firms in Europe and the Middle East. Her product is invisible code, immune to the tariffs that plague physical goods. She describes not just relief, but a complex realization of her new worth. The sustainable value of her intellectual capital creates a stability her father never knew, even as she navigates the immense pressure of competing in an intangible, abstract marketplace. This generational shift grounds the economic strategy in human reality, showing that the pursuit of higher value standards is also about creating dignity and long-term stability for the workforce. A systemic shift from quantity to disruptive quality requires massive national guidance and a comprehensive industrial strategy. This began with Made in China 2025 in 2015, a foundational strategy to comprehensively upgrade industry towards innovation-driven quality. It set concrete domestic content goals, aiming for 70% self-sufficiency in core components by 2025. Critically, it marked a structural shift towards strengthening IP protection and participating effectively in international standard setting. However, the latest iteration, New Quality Productive Forces, represents a significant escalation. NQPF aims beyond incremental improvement towards disruptive technological innovation, creating entirely new high-growth sectors from the ground up. This requires a new national system designed to mobilize huge budgets and coordinate research to rapidly secure leadership in nascent fields. The ambition of NQPF is visible in the specific targets set by the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. The list includes the mass deployment of humanoid robots, leadership in quantum computing, nuclear fusion for long-term energy security, and large-scale exploration of the Moon and Mars. The goal is explicit: to lead not in existing markets, but in the nascent markets that will define the global economy of 2040 and beyond. By defining the rules in these new domains, the strategy secures a position untouched by physical tariffs. The conversation shifts from selling a cheap EV to controlling the fundamental operating system for future colonies or industries. If the new export is knowledge and the goal is to lead the next generation of industry, the most valuable asset is the standard that the patent supports. A technical standard is a basic specification, a protocol like USB-C or Wi-Fi that makes systems compatible.
Economically, mastering standards creates a foundational dependency known as path dependency. If a technology is embedded within a universally adopted standard, every future product must evolve along that defined path. This creates a lock-in effect where the switching cost, replacing infrastructure, training, and hardware, becomes astronomical, far exceeding the cost of any trade tariff. By setting the standard, a country creates a self-reinforcing market advantage protected by technical debt rather than political borders.
Historically, China's standardization system was highly centralized under the Standardization Administration of China, but it became a bottleneck, producing over 150,000 often redundant or contradictory standards. The standardization reforms starting around 2015 aimed to retool this system for global competitiveness through three solutions: rationalization, central concentration, and liberalization. This hybrid system harnesses the speed of the private sector while maintaining strategic oversight. Beyond market efficiency, national standards serve to improve governance in health, safety, and environment, while strategically facilitating indigenous innovation by harmonizing R&D efforts. The China Standard 2035 plan is the definitive strategy for maximizing global influence, focusing on internationalizing Chinese standards in critical fields like AI governance and smart manufacturing. The success of this strategy is best seen in 5G, where China's efforts are reshaping global technical architecture. The release of the first international standard for industrial 5G, jointly led by China and Germany under the IEC, demonstrates this power. It fills a critical gap by providing a unified technical framework for industrial 5G, showcasing Chinese technical expertise as an essential contribution to global digital transformation. For an engineer like Elena, a telecom network architect in Southeast Asia, this standardization is transformative. For years, her professional life was a humiliating battle against incompatibility, trying to bridge European hardware with American software, which led to unreliable connections and professional frustration. When her team adopted 5G protocols based on Chinese patents, she was given a universal language. The interoperability made deployment faster and connections reliable, allowing critical services like remote medicine to function without failure. For Elena, the standard wasn't an economic weapon, it was structural relief, a foundational public good that allowed her to build effectively. To deploy these standards globally, the strategy employs a dual-track approach: constructive participation in established multilateral bodies, and the creation of new China-centered avenues. China has secured major leadership roles in the ITU and IEC, aligning perfectly with its economic pivot. Simultaneously, the Belt and Road Initiative promotes soft docking, the alignment of technical and governance standards through infrastructure investment. This is supported by digital tools like the bilingual translation cloud platform, ensuring standards are accessible to partner nations. This collaborative export model converges in the ASEAN region, where the 2024 summit produced a blueprint for cooperation. The 7 measures focus on harmonizing regulations, building digital infrastructure, and accelerating the application of emerging tech. Crucially, the measures emphasize human capital, digital literacy, and support for MSMEs. This ensures that the technology benefits local economies organically, creating long-term buy-in. The shift from transactional trade to knowledge partnership is perfectly illustrated by Arif in Jakarta. His family business spent decades importing cheap plastic goods, a trade that felt secure but hollow, leaving him as a precarious middleman. His new venture, partnering with a Chinese EV firm, represents a complete structural shift. He did not just buy vehicles, he invested in an ecosystem, attending training on smart logistics software and maintenance protocols. He noted that while they used to send plastic boxes, they are now sending the blueprint to build modern infrastructure. This reframes the relationship. The value is in the intangible software and standards, giving Arif the agency to build a modern system.
It establishes a long-term dependency based on shared knowledge, making Chinese standards integral to the partner nation's growth. The existential question of how a massive economy breaks the ceiling of physical manufacturing is answered by this decisive pivot. It is a shift away from the quantifiable physical export volume that fuels trade wars and toward intangible, indispensable assets, foundational patents, high-value services, and global technical standards. This strategy creates a new source of sustained growth insulated from traditional friction. The goal is to embed Chinese technology so deeply that reliance on it becomes critical for how other economies function. It is the profound difference between replacing a supplier of T-shirts and the immense disruptive task of replacing the core operating software of a national power grid. This technological advantage, the invisible export, redraws the economic map based on intellectual rather than physical infrastructure.